at all that this is Che Guevara. It's the most fantastic sight, very pale, ghastly, ghostly yellow colour. His head has rolled back onto the stretcher in which he was brought in. His eyes are still open, balls of his eyes sticking out at you. They're now telling us to get out of it. They're taking all the people away. Che Guevara is being held up by his hair again. It's a terrible sight. His eyes are rolling. Now that the army are telling him to get away, army officers standing all around the body, a corporal holding him up by his head, and now his head's rolled back onto the stretcher. We've got to go. They're coming at us with the rifle butts now. They're coming at us with the rifle butts.
When a Bolivian soldier gunned down Ernesto Che Guevara in October 1967, he played his part in the creation of a legend. Europe stood on the brink of a wave of violent political protest, and for many Guevara was its inspiration. But though the image inspired a generation, his followers knew little about the man who created it. In revolutionary mythology, he fought tirelessly for justice, yet he ordered the execution of hundreds. In public, he led the fight against American imperialism, while in secret, he tried to broker a deal with Kennedy. His theories were a blueprint for revolution, but when he put them into practice in the Congo and Bolivia, they led to disaster and defeat.
This is the year of 68 when all these incredible things were happening. We were the 60s new left, wanted to change the world, turn it, Paris, Rome, Berlin, we will fight, we will win. All this stuff. And there was Che, as this guy who, he'd been a revolutionary.
The Cuban Revolution was the first time, I think, that people had risen up and thrown off the yoke of American imperialism, and everybody looked on that as being a wonderful thing. I mean, it was a tremendous inspiration.
I think a lot of the people who were there were not terribly sure of quite who he was or quite where he came from, but they knew that he was a revolutionary, somebody who was prepared to fight and die to change the world, and that was enough.
His image was incredible, and this was the amazing thing about him, was his image. He had the beard and the hair. I mean, he looked like a guy at a Grateful Dead.
He was somebody who represented something that was going on across the world, a vision of a new and different world. And in some way, Che, for many different people in many different places, represented that desire and that yearning.
He was a romantic hero of the left. There was one story I remember of a very, very rich family in Kensington, which had 3 daughters, all of whom had become revolutionaries, and the most revolutionary of these daughters, on the day that Guevara died, painted in lipstick on a huge mirror the words, "I can't live without Che."
Havana, Cuba, 1957, the Las Vegas of the Caribbean. For the elite, life under the Batista regime was good, but the high life for a few had come at the expense of misery for many.
The Batista regime was brutal, cruel, fantastically corrupt. I mean, something like 50% of the gross domestic product went in one form or another of graft payment, to give you an idea of how corrupt this state was.
It had also been the vehicle of United States companies which controlled and were strangling Cuban economic life. It had been the vehicle of corrupt interests and indeed even the US mafia.
When Castro, Guevara and the Revolutionary Army marched into Havana in January '59, ordinary Cubans rejoiced. The years of repression and exploitation were over.
It was a carnival-like atmosphere, partly because it was the first time that a Latin American country, under the eyes of Uncle Sam, was striking out on its own course.
There was a ready-made revolutionary mythology. Castro, Guevara, and their small band of unshaven guerrillas had come down from the mountains to liberate Cuba.
Ya llegaron de las tierras, porque los mandó Fidel, libertaron nuestra tierra y nos dieron la paz al volver. Por las calles aclamamos su ideal, supe que más pudo. Todos gritan, han triunfado, que viva Fidel, vivan los barbudos.
First measures of the revolution were immensely popular. A campaign against illiteracy, a campaign to spread health so that it was freely available to every citizen, a whole raft of social measures that were very popular. And I think this was in the air even in the early days, and it was very infectious.
But amid the euphoria, the new president had some scores to settle. He chose his closest ally to take care of them. Guevara was appointed commander-in-chief here at La Cabaña, a military court overlooking Havana. His job was to hand out revolutionary justice.
In Havana, foreign pressmen heard rebel leader Fidel Castro defend the summary courts-martial of members of the deposed Batista regime. He said 400 would face firing squads. Relatives of 700 awaiting trial wait in long queues, each prisoner wondering every hour whether he will escape the revolution quick justice.
Despite the skepticism of foreign journalists, Guevara had no doubt that he was doing what was best for Cuba.
Violence is not the monopoly of the exploiters, and as such the exploited can use it too, and what is more, ought to use it when the moment arrives.
In this courtroom during the early months of 1959, Guevara presided over a series of military tribunals. Within the space of a few months, hundreds were condemned to their deaths.
En La Cabaña fue el sitio donde más ejecuciones hubo en Cuba. Muchas de estas ejecuciones fueron de una grandísima violencia. Y Guevara fue con Raúl Castro y con Ramiro Valdés, aparte de Fidel Castro, la persona.
As well as the production line justice at La Cabaña, the new government put on several spectacular show trials.
In the Sports Palace, 17,000 people in carnival atmosphere watched the revolutionary tribunal of three men conducting Havana's first war crimes hearing. Major Sosa Blanco, 51, was accused of murder, torture, robbery. Among numerous witnesses against Blanco was a 12-year-old boy, Angelio Estrada. Above the shrieks of the gallery, the loudspeakers carried the testimony. Even before it was fully heard, the crowd shouted, "Kill him!" This was justice in Cuba, revolution style. Apparently, Blanco remained calm as the youngster pointed a finger at him and cried, "He killed my father." It's almost needless to say the prisoner was found guilty and sentenced to death.
He saw it as a necessity, a necessary first step in the creation of a new state, to clear out the old. Now, I know it's open to lots of issues and debates and questioning, but what he said, for example, in one speech was, we cannot show any mercy to those who were responsible for the oppressive character of the Batista regime. So I think he saw it as a necessary cleansing.
This process of political cleansing led to 400 deaths at La Cabaña alone. Within the country as a whole, the numbers were far greater.
This was not the dilemma of conscience for him.